Greetings and welcome to JS Presents. What's the date today? This is the 8th, 9th, February 9th, 2024. I have an interview tonight with a former co-sponsor of this video, and that is Commander Lee Hayhurst. He's here, he's well, he's doing good, and he's got some things to say. And so I'm just going to turn you over to him now, and we'll do a one-on-one interview, and you can let us know what you think. Here he comes.
This will be delving into conspiracies. I don't like to use the word theories because theories was made out, a theory term was made up by the CIA, the secret people. And just like the word quack, when we have a doctor that comes up with a revolutionary cure for some disease that the companies are making a lot of money on, they'll call him a quack because they want to discredit him. We know all about discrediting in scripture. You know, when the rabbis, heard about people raising from the dead and everything, they would try to discredit those that were involved. I don't need this for a while. And then, of course,
Put him on the top there. That's fine.
then we know about Fox's Book of Martyrs that we don't want to go into that right now. But if you've read that, you understand that the Roman Church came against that book in those years back.
Well, why?
Well, it was cutting into their, as it always comes down to the love of money. It always comes down to money. So they were delving into their sacred, how shall I say, the sacraments they have of basically giving money. It comes down to that, doesn't it? The rabbis were losing their power in the first century when Yeshua was there. They didn't want to lose power in sight of the Roman government. And so they wanted to discredit Yeshua and all that he was doing. And then we've also, of course, I see a disemboweled hand over here.
Yeah. I'm going to get out of the way here.
So, even before that, we're talking about in the garden when Hasatan would say, did Yahweh not say? Did he really say that? And that was the first, I would imagine, one of the first conspiracies against authority back then. So it's never gone away.
I suspect that Fox's Book of Martyrs also kind of exposed not only money, but also what the church was doing, because weren't all the martyrs in Fox's book martyred by the Catholic Church?
Well, tortured first.
Oh, yeah.
And then martyred. But yeah. And there was a lot of Sabbatarians that were martyred during that time, I'm sure, too. Polycarp, if you've seen the Book of Martyr, you've heard of Polycarp and his time as burning at the stake. We've gone over that in the Yahad. So it's not something new. It's not something new. We've had 2 world wars that if we wanted to run down the rabbit hole, we can find out it was about money. It was about money.
Can you go into that a little bit?
The wars?
Yeah, why, who's behind these wars? You think somebody or some family or some faction is really starting all these wars for pecuniary advantage, for money, right?
Yes. The fiat system, the system where their money, our fiat system was controlled by, you've heard of the Rothschilds. They were alive. During the Napoleonic Wars, I haven't done a deep dive into it, but they supplied both sides, the French side and the English side, with money. So they would make money on both sides of the equation. They would lend money to both sides. And the one I heard about was when, now, a lot of these things that I'm going to talk about are in scripture, some are in history. And I don't have the exact dates or anything about it, but you can check if you look at it, you can check it. When we had the Battle of Waterloo, the Knights Templar had a faster horse or a faster couple of people that when Napoleon lost the war, two guys or a number of guys raced back to England and reported that Napoleon won the war, which wasn't true. But all of a sudden the stock market tanked, because they were going to lose money if Napoleon won the war.
From a false report.
It was a false report to make money. And the Knights Templar did that. But when the true guys came back and reported that he lost the war, the Knights Templar or those power that be that knew they were in the loop, they made a bundle of money. So they really cleaned up, and probably, I don't know what the outcome what it was, but that was the reason why. The world wars, fiat currency was never meant to last for very long.
What is fiat? Is
Fiat
that manufactured automobiles in Italy?
No, fiat is a reserve currency. That's what they term it as. It's when they create money, they give it to they just let me think now. They kind of invent money. They make like the beads. Norman Gray, Norman coming up.
Event alarm. Okay.
Okay. Fiat is the reserve currency. Let's go on that. Fiat. I didn't write that down, so I don't have it right
It's
definition.
just like temporary markers for money. I remember when we were talking about early American history. They
Okay.
used chits and stuff. They really had no value intrinsically, but they stood for something. I guess usually, our money nowadays doesn't stand for anything, I don't think, does it?
They used to say that our dollar was based upon the good faith of the United States of America, well, so called. But as we've learned more, there is no faith in the United States anymore.
Not much.
Not around the world right now.
When we were kids, each bill had silver certificate.
That's
as I
for a while.
remember.
For that was, yes.
It was backed by silver.
Mm-hmm.
Okay, so fiat currency is really not backed by anything.
It's like cryptocurrency is another animal. That's just backed by what people are willing to pay for it or to buy with it. And so it does have its place. In fact, Scripture talks about a cashless society, and that's what the Federal Reserve Board wants to go to now. They want to go to a digital currency like that, a non-cash, just online, so they can control us. The Great Reset is what called Charles Schwab. Is it Schwab or the guy that does the World Economic Forum? They just had a meeting here recently.
I don't think
Anyway.
that's Charles Schwab, but
No.
I know who you're talking
Yeah.
about. The continental European mogul.
Right. Well, I'm getting off the topic here, but you're talking about the wars. Yes, the wars were meant to cover up when the currency had to devalue. So when the currency devalues, they manipulate it so that they can make a lot more and control it and reset the currency. Instead of what Scripture had, what Yahweh had in the beginning was the year of Jubilee. Now, that's real controversial too, because people back then were structuring their loans so that it would come due at the year of Jubilee. Every 50 years, the currency needs to be reset. But the deep state, let's term that term. Don't ask me to define the deep state, because it's a lot of evil people, and it's not Democrat or Republican anymore. It's evil versus good. So, but the world wars were manipulated so that they would cover up the assassinations that happened during those times, especially the First World War, with Ferdinand somebody. I forget what his name was. But if you're a history buff, you would definitely understand. And the First World War set up the place for the Second World War.
Some people have said that we've been in the Third World War now since the 60s. You kind of feel that way, or?
Well, I think, wasn't it Nixon that started that, or war on poverty? They didn't have any, they didn't have an evil guy. It was just it was a perfect war. You could never defeat poverty because scripture says poverty will always be, the poor will always be with you. So it was the perfect thing. And then we had Truman, who coined the phrase, the military industrial complex. It was guys that produced the bombs, who manufactured the bombs. So they need a war every so often in order to redo their inventory. If they could have 100 years, 1,000 years of peace, nobody will stop by the bombs or the bullets. So they create a war to clean out the coffers, to reduce the population. That's another thing. But yeah, the wars have been made to cover up for the different resets that have to happen. That's where they're trying to push for a third world war so much with Russia, and with the Ukraine, and with Israel going on in the and the Hamas, whatever. They're trying to get us into a war.
Are you advocating that the Great Reset, so-called, is something good?
No.
Or something evil?
Evil.
All right.
They want to go to a total digit currency, like it talks about in Revelation, but for their nefarious ends.
Okay.
They wanted to say that you'll own nothing, but you'll be happy.
Mm-hmm.
And
well, how does that have to do with resetting the currency then?
The global currency reset, as it's called, is not doing away with cash, but it is forgiving debt. And that goes into what's called Nasera or Gasera. That's another topic. Mm-hmm. But it's trying to reset. They're trying to mimic, as the enemy does all the time, mimic the year of Jubilee. And we know the year of Jubilee, we studied that. Every other land would go back to its original owner, but that's not what's going to happen this time. I mean, that was for a closed society within Israel. Every 50 years, the year of Jubilee, they would reset the financial system, which after that many years, fiat currency basically breaks down. That's why they needed the wars so often. And then we had, when in 1913, if you know history, is when the Federal Reserve was brought about. It was few bankers, American bankers, that started this national currency. And it was brought in financed by the Rothschilds of Europe. And then it had the backing, somehow it had the backing of the gold from the Chinese elders. Yeah. They financed our currency.
These people had something to do with setting up of the Federal Reserve?
They financed the first currency here, the national currency.
China?
Chinese elders, not CCP. Okay. Well, I'm not talking about CCP. Think of the CCP as the evil counterpart of China. Okay. So we're trying to do it away with CCP, yes. Communist Party. Let's move on to Jekyll Island. Jekyll Island was when the Federal Reserve Board, which is what our dollar bill belongs to, and we borrow the money. That's an interesting concept. We borrow the money? What do you mean? Well, actually, yes. Our income tax doesn't go to the Treasury Department. Where does it go? It goes to the IRS. Yeah. The IRS is actually an offshoot from the Federal Reserve Board, who is a private company started in Puerto Rico. They're incorporated. It's owned by three entities. The City of London, the Rothschilds, and the Vatican.
Are you saying that the Federal Reserve and those that set it up were not part of the government.
No,
Surely there are now. Federal Reserve, everybody knows it's federal.
it's about as federal as Federal Express.
Okay.
And as a reserve, they have no reserve. If you understand banking, you know that when they give a loan out, they only have to have 2% of that loan in the bank in cash.
Right.
That belongs to the bank. Everything else is loaned out. Now, I'm not privy of everything that goes on with that, but I do know that they don't have, when you buy a car on loan from the bank, they don't have 20, 30, $40,000 to give you, or that's not in the reserve. What they do is they basically just invent the money. They put interest on it. They transfer it in the computer in ones and zeros to that other party. Was never physically there.
Same thing with your bank. If you have savings in a bank, it's last time I worked at a bank, it was only 2%
Mhm.
set apart to pay off everybody. So if there's a run on the bank would have to close within about an hour because they ran out of money.
You're talking about the FDIC.
Yes.
Okay. Yeah, they only have $250,000 per account per, if everything goes bust.
And then they wouldn't get that because it would go over the 2% that they're insured for.
Right.
They'd have to come up with it somewhere.
You get pennies on the dollar.
Like, for instance, recently, that one investment bank failed that finances motion pictures,
Mm.
and they came to the government.
Oh, a bail-in.
You remember that?
bailout.
Bailout to the
Yeah.
government, and the government turned over billions of dollars to them, which they didn't have either. They just turned it over. It couldn't be any more fiat than fiat. I mean, there's nothing there.
And then we have something called bail-in, which our media has never harped on, but in Greece they did have it. The way the laws are structured is that when you put some in the bank, it's not your money anymore. When you deposit that cash or check, it belongs to the bank. They can do whatever they want with it by law. So when Greece a few years ago happened, the banks there started to go bust, and they decided to bail in. What they did was they took the money from their depositors and paid off their mistakes. Now that could be a conspiracy theory, as they're calling it, because nobody would believe something that drastic or impossible.
That's a bail-in.
It's a bail-in.
They just seize their depositors' money, whatever there is of it that's there.
Well, they promised to pay it back.
Yeah.
Yeah.
But they don't. How
no.
could they?
No. Who do they get it from then? From you?
A bailout. Well, especially Greece. I know when that happened, they had no money in reserve.
Right. So it happened when they met. It was on Jekyll Island, an island off of Georgia or South Carolina. Someone probably would know better. But there was those three guys that were coming over from Europe to offer a different plan. And we know what happened with them was they got on a ship, they went across the North Atlantic, and all of a sudden a mysterious iceberg came up and slit the ship in half. These three billionaires, and they all three went down in the boat. What a coincidence. There's a whole thing about that too.
What boat was that?
I guess you can guess by now. It was a Titanic.
Was it? Okay.
Yeah. So when they weren't there, the only thing left was the these bankers like JP Morgan, Chase, a number of Warburg, different ones. They're the ones that started the National Reserve Board. It's a company. They have an office in Puerto Rico, and then the Bank of London came in, Rothschilds, and then the Vatican also came in. So our money, our tax dollars, income tax, we pay it, goes to the Federal Reserve. It goes through the Bank of London, the Rothschilds, and then through the Vatican. And then eventually it'll get loaned back to our treasury at interest. Who do you think we own the national debt to? Certainly not me, not Jackson. We owe it to this corporation that lended us our currency.
But what if they just made up the currency? I understand that we could never pay off the debt because there is no such cash, or there's no such amount of well, currency, whatever it is valuable in the world. Even they just, when they want it, they just tell the Federal Reserve, make some more.
The printing press.
Yeah.
Just
But
make one coin
I
that
don't know
says
much about it.
$33 trillion.
Oh,
Make
yeah.
one coin with that, but it won't work because too many people are on the take. Too much corruption going on. There's many people that are financed through laundering. I mean, you have the drug cartels, you have the politicians, the crooked ones, and we don't have any more Democrat and Republican, liberal and conservative. We have basically bad guys and good guys. That's what we have. Because we have something called Rhino now. Now, if you're politically savvy, you know what Rhino means: Republican in name only. But we know of Republicans, like I said, that are crooked too.
Funny you said that. Yesterday, I was waiting for Trelly to come out of a store, and I just happened to have Sean Hannity on the radio, and he asked his co-host there, it's a lady, I can't, Linda or something like that, and he says, how do you see these political parties now? And he says, she said, well, there's only one way I've seen this for a long time, and that is the good ones and the evil ones. There's just a dualistic cut between them here. They're either good or they're evil. There's nowhere in the middle. They're either good or evil.
Okay. Now that we've gotten to the thing where we realize there are things going on in the world, conspiracies, people working against each other for political gain. Okay, now we have the wars. The biggest one that I know of is the Second World War, Germany. What happened to the currency during the Second World War was that the Federal Reserve, who controlled Germany's money also, devalued the German mark so that it was worth peanuts. Many other countries had the same thing. But after the war, they raised the currency back up for reconstruction. But they raised it up where it was from before. People that had marks had bought it when it was really cheap, and then they exchanged it back in after the war is over, and they raised it back up. They made out.
They should have just kept their barrels full and their closets full of those marks
Exactly.
until afterwards.
Mm-hmm.
Turn them in. I see.
The same thing happened just recently, more or less recently, with Iraq, with Kuwait and Iraq. When Kuwait was invaded by Iraq, they started ripping off the banks to take in their Kuwaiti dinar, as their currency is called, the dinar. And it was worth 342, I believe, something like that, dollars, American dollars, per Kuwaiti dinar. So when they devalued the currency so they couldn't make war anymore out of their currency, they couldn't fight, couldn't buy the weapons anymore because it was so cheaply the currency was. So after the war, I've understood that a friend of the YAHAD years ago, he knows somebody, and it's a kind of hearsay, but this soldier had gotten wind of this and bought and kept a bunch of Kuwaiti dinar. So right after the war, the currency came back to like 341 per Kuwaiti dinar. The guy bought a house outright with what he had brought back. Yeah, they revalued the Iraqi dollar, also the dinar, until you can almost buy 1 million for like, what, $40?
20 years ago, everybody was selling it.
Oh, yeah. I remember in '02, when I first heard about it, I didn't purchase any back then. But it was worth, barely like a barrel load full of currency to buy a loaf of bread. Not really, but yeah, you can get it very cheaply.
So this is why you're saying some people are hoarding up this, well, currency that's seemingly worth nothing right now.
Right.
And when you talk about a reset, when they reset the world currency, that's going to be worth much, much more.
Yeah. The reason why they're getting off the fiat system, they're getting rid of that, and they're going to the gold standard. When Nixon took us off the gold standard, all of a sudden the printing presses started to just go nuts. They just started pulling out bills. People were making so much money, but it was false money. It was eventually going to go down. When Obama was talking about quantitative easing, sounded like a good thing. It was ease up the requirement. What it was what you have a pie, and then you just make more slices in the pie and make it worth what was before. So basically, you're pumping more dollars into the environment, into the system, but it's cheap dollars. But he was pumping trillions into the system just in cash, or just putting on a computer 000, about times 17 or something like that. So what I'm saying, though, is that when the Kuwaiti dinar revalued, the military got wind of this, the rank and file or the officers. They said, well, what are you talking about? We should have been in on that. We fought the war. Well, first it happened in Vietnam. They also discounted the Vietnam dong, as it's called, DONG. They did that, but they've never revalued the dong yet. But the current Iraqi currency, the military said, the bankers said, oh, we'll let you in on the next one, but just don't tell anybody. They wanted to keep it their own little secret, just like the Kuwaiti thing. But the military didn't believe them. They didn't trust them. Gee, you don't trust a banker? I don't understand. With good reason. So they slowly started to tell everybody. Some people believed it. Some people say, no, how could that ever happen? And a lot of people have bought the Iraqi currency.
So has anything happened that it's somewhat stable today? Has anything happened with that currency since?
Vietnam, yes. Vietnam is very stable.
Yeah. It's supposed to be going up because all the manufacturing is happening in Vietnam.
Their economy is very strong, but they've devalued their dollar on purpose so that they can make money on exports.
Okay.
The two famous figures, according to my understanding, have bought currency, have bought the Iraqi dinar. One was Trump, and the other one was Warren Buffett. Warren Buffett, yeah, the financier. But both of them have bought million American dollars worth of currency over there. So I remember Warren Buffett saying it's a long-term investment when he bought it. So that's what he was counting on, a long-term investment. And he's very smart. He's billionaire guy. And we know Trump has a few billion. So, okay. But it's been taking a long time because the Federal Reserve Board has had 100 years since 1913, if not before, entrenching into our law system. They've been able to buy off politicians, infiltrate national education, and the lawyers. When someone joins the bar, what are they really joining? They're joining an organization over in London to uphold the status quo.
Yeah, that's true.
So when they say, when the Supreme Court says, and we're not under our laws anymore, the Constitution was changed in 1871. It's called the Law from London. What it did was it put all the the name United States of America in capital letters. Now, if you know anything about trusts or anything about legalese, yeah, business language, you know, if something's in capital letters, it means that it's a business. I don't want to get into the birth certificate nor the marriage license right now, but needless to say, it is a business. It's the United States Incorporated. So we have a different constitution. So when the Supreme Court says you don't have standing to bring this law to us, that's what they're talking about. They're talking about their laws. So we don't live under a constitution anymore. We have a different constitution that was made up for us. It wasn't the original one, but that's what this whole thing is trying to bring about, is bring us back to the original constitution, restore the states' rights. Right now we have going on in Texas, going to secede from the Union, start their own country. They want to join, we'll get into BRICS. If you understand BRICS, what Russia and China and different countries are trying to do, a different money system, they're getting away from the Federal Reserve, the European Union, Federal Reserve system. It's Brazil, Russia, India, China, and South Africa. And last count, it was over 100 countries that have been coming into it. And Saudi Arabia is one of them. Then in the 70s also, 1971, I think it was, Nixon sent Kissinger over to Saudi Arabia and made a deal with them. We'll protect you if you'll make it only that people can buy oil in American dollars. And they agreed to it. So all of OPEC has to buy, everybody has to buy oil from them in American dollars. So how do we get away with printing so much money and still going and still having an economy? We just, everybody pays in dollars. So everybody has to buy dollars and have it in their current reserve in their country. But anyway, it makes us a lot of money. So now even Saudi Arabia has gotten away from what's called the petrodollar. And that.
Okay.
Okay.
I've got a question for you.
Yes.
This is an election year.
Um,
And I don't want to get into politics, except to ask, back on this topic of good and evil, I've heard about them trying in Texas and in Oregon,
mhm.
some to get out
Montana,
of the
Freeman,
United States.
the Freeman.
Yeah, and thinking that I have heard in the grapevine that some political factions are claiming that they will dump the Federal Reserve and dump the IRS if they're elected. You know anything about that?
Not directly,
I'm just playing dumb here.
but that's what they want to do. They want to dump the IRS and the federal, well, which is an outreach, which is a collections agency of the Federal Reserve, which is a private company. And when they did that law back in 1913, now I've understood. I thought they did it during Christmas break, but now I heard there was never any vote. Very few of none of the states really elected it. They just made it into law, and if you come against it, we had a gentleman here in Vero who has a chiropractic agency, and he got a hold of somebody got a hold of him and said, you know, the IRS is fake, you know, this and everything, and he took him to court, proved that he didn't know taxes for the IRS. He proved it to them. They still sent him to jail, bankrupted his family. He had to sell all his property to keep his family going for a whole year. He finally let him out on something that, and we have a case right in the Supreme Court now about the same thing, the Brunson case. He proved he didn't know them anything, but they still put him in jail. Now the Supreme Court actually tomorrow or today, they were supposed to, what's today, 9th of February, 24. They were supposed to have a real ruling on that. Also the Trump thing getting in getting in the primary for some state
Colorado?
in Colorado.
Oh, yeah.
They're supposed to have that today. There's three big states, companies there. There's cases before the Supreme Court today. Now, I haven't heard as of this time what's become of it.
I've
Oh.
heard a lot of stuff last night on the radio. Again, I was waiting for Trelly someplace and I turned it on. It was Brian Kilmeade.
Mm-hmm.
And he had an expert, I can't tell you who, on, and the expert was asked, what's going to happen with this Colorado thing in the Supreme Court tomorrow? And he said, oh, there's no way in the world. It's going to be 9-0.
In
And,
favor or against?
Against. That is to say that Colorado cannot have the favored place to dictate to the rest of the country who's going to be the president.
Mm-hmm.
And in a minor way, they would. Because if they take somebody off, a legitimate candidate off the ballot, what they're saying is that this candidate should be off the ballot in the entire United States. And so, of course, the pundit said, all the Supreme Courts were going to be against that happening and leave that candidate on the ballot. And that would be quite something if it was a 9-0 decision. We got pretty close to that sometime in the last year, but it's hard to believe that you could have 9-0 on anything with the people that's on that Supreme Court now.
Especially since a lot of them were Democrat, liberal judges that were picked. So these are so things are going to happen very quickly when it does happen. And Iraq is trying to get us out of, they want sovereignty. Iraq does. We've done so much to that. We've torn up Vietnam. Now you have different opinions of what happened in Vietnam. I know Jackson did as his youth.
Well, the head of the armed forces at that time, McNamara, came out tearfully confessing that in the last stages of that war, they threw so many young men into it, something like 500 a day cannon fodder getting killed, and that the whole basis for the war toward the end, Lyndon Johnson and a couple of the other presidents were in this specifically for money. Now, this is McNamara crying on national television, making these confessions that he was part of because he felt so guilty about it.
They have something called McNamara's morons or something like that.
I don't know.
They reduced the IQ level of the soldiers to get more soldiers or cannon fodder, as you talk about.
Exactly right. And
yeah.
When I was just a kid in junior high school, I was debating, as silly as that sounds, a junior high school kid debating, 13, 14 years old, but our debates were very serious. And I was debating against the Vietnam War,
right?
Because I knew I'd probably have to go in a couple of years. But I studied that very thing, and I found, what was a real research magazine at the time was Time magazine. It's not anymore, but at the time, Time did a very well-researched article about the dumbing down of intelligence quota in order to get more, I guess it would be manipulate young people more to come in.
Overweight.
And put them into the front lines up there in North Vietnam. And that's what I used as my debate theme. This is all about money. This is all about eliminating the dummies, excuse my language, eliminating people that certain powers to be didn't want. And it certainly was. And about that time too, some men I knew had been killed in that. And then at the end of the Vietnam War, people my age were being drafted in. And I won't go into that except to say they didn't come back the same.
Mm.
Because when they were drafted at the end of the war, where do you think they were put? Well, I don't know for sure, but I suspect they were put right on the front lines. And
Yeah.
what was you only lasted an average, I've heard, 7 seconds on the front line in any battle scene.
Yeah.
So, all right, I'm done.
Okay. Okay. We were at the fiat.
Well, you did
Iraq.
good.
We were at Iraq. Now we've had this Iraqi dinar that's been for sale at the reduced price. I heard about it in 2002. And then we had a guy, I don't know if I want to go into Steve or not. Someone brought this stuff to us again at one of Sukkoth's years ago. And people didn't put too much stock in it. We some people did. Some people did, like exactly 3 of us. Uh, and we try to spread the word, try to talk to people about it, but they wondered what we can get out of it. There's nothing. I don't get a piece of your action or anything like that. But some people just like skeptics, like conspiracy theory. Again, the theory part was added on by the CIA to discredit truthers that would, whistleblowers.
You're talking about reevaluating currency
Yeah,
to make a profit.
to make a profit.
Okay.
But that's no problem there. I mean, that's business.
Yeah.
But that I wouldn't, when I encourage people to buy it, they would expect me to get something out of it, which they don't. They own the currency, they physically own it in their pocket, and it comes through the banks. It came through the banks or through the mail. Amazon was even selling some of it.
So they're selling lower currencies that are low, say now, in
value, but the dollar amount is quite high.
assuming that it was going to reset in equal 1-for-1 currency.
At least, yes.
Okay.
And that's what GESARA, what's it called? It's a NESARA, National Economic Securities Recovery Act, which was done by the farmers who realized that the banks were stealing their property from them.
Mhm.
And they went all to the Supreme Court, and this happened during Clinton's years. Now, Clinton said, I'm never going to sign this. He was going to sign it into law, where all the farmers were going to get recompensed, and Indian nations also. The indigenous people were going to get reimbursed for a lot of things. And the bonds, the railroad bonds, different bonds that they had out.
Subsidies?
No, there was stuff that the government actually owed them for things done wrong.
Oh, okay.
And so he was forced to sign it at gunpoint by the military.
That's a conspiracy theory? Who, Clinton?
Clinton was sat down and at gunpoint by the military to sign this paper. That's a conspiracy. People say it didn't happen because, and for a while, that was a capital offense to talk about it.
Oh.
NESARA was supposed to be enacted. We had another famous thing. It happened in New York. 2 big buildings went down.
Yeah.
The Twin Towers. That was the very day that GESARA was supposed to be enacted. But, the media, which is controlled since, again, back in the day, under an operation called Mockingbird, that was supposed to go on that day. 2 days before that, Rumsfeld made the announcement that $2.2 trillion was missing from the defense budget.
Yes.
But 2 days later, the media was quickly switched to the towers. So it grabbed the media and it never looked back. now we have such a controlled media that I just don't listen to it anymore.
Well, that's amazing that Rumsfeld would come out with that kind of news. And that it didn't get leaked first and be used to destroy it. Mhm.
He was connected. He
Yeah.
was part of the Mockingbird. And then you had Rush Limbaugh come out and, upset their all apple cart, as it were. But so this has been happening for a while. Gosera is another thing that that has been, let me train my thought, has been adding to what we're coming to today. Because without Gosera, without this cleaning up of the laws, they would steal this money that would be reclaimed. If the fiat currency was still going on and they revalued the money, they would steal it from us in taxes big time. Okay, so we have a couple of they call them baskets of currencies. There's going to be many, many different currencies. Will be the Iraqi dinar, the Vietnam dong, Indian rupiah, the Russian ruble, I believe, the Chinese yuan, the Japanese yen, and many other currencies around the world are going to revalue up to where they were before because of inflation. Our currency will be devalued so that now, after the fact, prices will go down to what they were in 1955. Now, how this ties in with the baskets. Okay, there are a few other countries that are not compliant to revalue right now. So there is an opportunity for us to get in on this again. And this is what I'm encouraging today, is to see this thing, because there's many other organizations, church organizations. One was the Mormons, the other one's, what did I mention? Pentecostal group, yeah. Maybe a few other ones that I don't know about. Their congregations have been encouraged to buy it.
They're rampant in the Philippines.
Yeah.
Rampant.
So what's going to happen when these people are all millionaires? What's going to happen to their congregations or their belief system? They're going to pump money into their missionaries, their people that are going to spread their message. And I'm just, we have something in this area called humanitarian efforts. So people with newfound money will make a better society for us, for people around.
Well, there's a lot of believers that are invested in this
Mm-hmm.
kind
A lot
of
of believers.
transaction.
Yeah.
I know that. Just because I've talked to so many of them.
But it's hard to believe because people say, oh, well, somebody has to lose money. Well, the people that lose money are the people that have been stealing it for just about ever.
Is that why the Great Reset is against this whole thing?
Yeah, because the only one that makes money there are the people, the elites, as it's called.
Yeah, they're all rich. They're all
Yeah.
rich people.
Yeah, the one that control the money
Hmm.
for their own benefit.
They're not only rich, they're filthy rich.
And they're corrupt. I don't want to get into the child trafficking, all that stuff, the organ transfers and everything. That's for someone else's scroll, as it's called. But it's not a very pleasant one, because we can go into the Josephus. We talked about that earlier, and what had happened in there with the within Jerusalem during
Yeah, there's a direct connection between this and the mark of the beast. Now, I'm not talking about what most people say here is that some big antichrist will come up in our time. That's not the connection. But the ancient connection, the purpose of the mark of the beast is works. It works the same way as this will today, where the rich can get richer
yeah.
off the backs of the poor, using that mark, which is really existed at that time. And it is very similar and more simplistic than today, but it's tax. It has to do with taxes,
Mhm.
where they stole so much money from the people. If they didn't have that tattoo or that mark at the time, then they couldn't buy or sell. Can you imagine you not be able to do that today?
With computers that we have to keep track of
Yeah.
you, facial recognition.
Well, it's moving there. You know, I worked in a bank in the 1980s, early 80s, and we had trade magazines, and the trade magazines all said by 1984, what I'm going to say, we're going to have that cashless society. We've worked on all this time. We got everything in place to do it. Look to 1984 and to the end of cash. Well, what is that? 30 or 40 years ago now, 40 years ago.
Someone made a movie out of it, didn't they?
I don't know. Probably somebody made a movie out of it to make money,
Yeah.
I imagine, rather than try to warn anybody. But that is going to come up sometime. Well, it already is with the IRS, and people aren't even going to know it. They're so dejected with other ideas about what the mark of the beast is.
Mm.
They just don't know that it's a concept having to do with finance and taxes, just exactly like Revelation said, Revelation 13. Okay.
So what I'm saying is, though, is that we would need to research, because I don't know the next currencies that are going to come out. There's a thing with this currency that you can't double dip, so that when we get the award from this one, we can't go buy the same currency again with our new riches, because you can just let it snowball and go up to trillions. But you can buy with this award, buy the next basket. So what I'm saying is we have another chance. And it's going to be as kept a secret, because when we have an exchange and we do that, you're under an NDA, non-disclosure agreement. So you can't talk about it. I've just had word yesterday where 3 people did talk, and all their awards were clawed back, as they call it. They were taken away from them because they signed this agreement. And if you violate it, you lose it. So
what's to allow you to do something like this?
Well, I'm not under an agreement yet.
Oh, I see.
Once the first phone call or email comes in, I sign a provisional one. And when I go actually to exchange, then you sign a paper that says you cannot talk about it under penalty of whatever.
So you're invested in this, but it hasn't come to the point yet that you had to sign
Right.
non-disclosure.
Right.
All right.
So I'm still in the clear, because I've told many hundreds of people, and a few people have got invested in it.
And you're just doing this to make money for yourself sometime?
Am I doing it as speaking about
Why
it?
is this non-disclosure? I mean, wouldn't they want
Okay.
you to tell people about this if you were selling it? What's the advantage for the kingdom?
Is to protect me and the people. If you won the lottery, say you won the lottery, you have millions of dollars now. How many people are you going to come out of the woodwork wanting money from you?
Yes, but I understood that you had to make some plans about what you were going to do with this money that was going to be advantageous to humanity in general.
Yes,
Like
there's
what?
humanitarian efforts.
You have some of those written down?
I do,
Or
not
can
with
you
me,
tell
not
about
with me.
that?
I can tell about them. There's something else. There's a medical device. I won't go into that. That's quite lengthy. That I want to put on the mercy ships that we've heard about.
Well, you can just tell what it is. Everybody's heard of it all.
Okay, med beds.
Okay.
It's supposed to be, here we go. Alien technology that Trump talked about 6,000 patents that were kind of come out when this thing all happened, because the patents that they have now. I'm on dialysis. Someone invented an artificial kidney, which is the problem with dialysis. But these companies, I heard, they bought up the patents. They say, well, we don't need it. We have enough with these, we make enough money with these machines that we plug people to. They make a lot with these machines, because, I wouldn't survive very long without a kidney machine. So these other devices, and like I say, we talked about the quack before. The quack were real medical doctors that found something that cures an incurable disease, or at least a disease that they treated, they never cured. They don't want to cure us. They being the pharmaceuticals and different doctors in the higher up. They want to keep us sick just long enough to keep us paying them.
Get your money.
Yeah.
Somebody's money.
I know what I get a report from the VA. I was in the military. I get a report from the VA every single month on how much the dialysis treatment costs taxpayers every month. You don't want to know how much it is. It's disgustingly high.
Do you actually, I know that you could probably tell.
$170,000 every month.
A piece?
Yeah.
Oh.
Every veteran
Mhm.
that goes on a machine. That was the highest I've seen so far.
That's
So
incredible.
we're going to get back to these devices. And that was one of the humanitarian efforts. I want to put one of these machines on the ships, mostly connected to Youth with a Mission. That was, well, I guess they're separated from that. But anyway, I want to put one on there. And I would like to put a couple of training centers in Africa. And I'm sure there's going to be many places. Right now, the military is going to be operating them. But now I've heard that if you go through that treatment, you've got to be under an NDA also, because people that were sick or something like that would be breaking down the doors to kind of get in. And they would threaten me to tell them where it happened. So that's what the NDA is, to protect us and to protect them, because the people knew that they did this, they would riot in the streets. And why didn't you say anything? Why didn't you put it in the Times, pull page out, ad out, and tell everybody? Well, we've been trying to, but well, they say they have about 9 million worldwide that have invested in currencies in this thing. I mean, out of 8 billion now, we have 8 billion in the world. That's not very many. So it's, that many millionaires now are not going to upset the apple cart, as it were.
But you didn't say much about this med bed.
I know.
That it will, on purpose, I won't say any more than that.
Well, from what I've heard, they're not out yet. Nobody's been treated by one. Well, yes, they are, but that's another subject. We have a United States Space Force. They're involved with that. The military are the only ones that are going to operate and are qualified to operate these medical beds. And what these things will do, they will replace my kidneys. Not a transplant, but from my own DNA. Are you familiar with the phantom pain when a soldier, say, loses his leg to an IDA, a mine or something? He loses a leg, but he still feels the pain. That's still the DNA of the nerve endings that think there's still a leg there. And so they can take that DNA and they can create a leg. How do they do it? I have no idea. I have no idea. And it's a secret patent.
I know how they do it. They would simply grow the tissue.
That's what I'm thinking. Yeah.
Yeah.
So they can actually transplant it in there, or they do it by transmitting it like Star Trek or whatever.
They're doing it with animals now.
Really?
And
See?
they're crossing the DNA for not only 2 different species, but several different species. They come up with chimeras. However, they are more healthy in some cases. Chimeras, that is monsters, that are bringing benefit maybe to 1 out of 1 million of these things. I know that sounds crazy, but I follow scientific news. I know what they're doing with growing tissue, and I know that even at Burger King, you can go get a very good hamburger made out of something that's not meat at all.
I heard McDonald's is, well,
Yeah, well, in
It's-
Japan, now they're selling burgers with meats made in, well, we'll say a test tube. You know, if they've gone that far with that, that you get a product you can eat, certainly they're able to use the DNA library to grow different parts of a person that will not be rejected. It's just
so
common sense.
these med beds are supposed to be doing this. Now, people, once they start talking about them, they go into the realm of science fiction. And sometimes you do see med beds on science fiction shows. Now, they've said that the movies theaters put something out there. Now, just because we think it's science fiction, it's not true. Doesn't mean they're not doing a documentary on it, or they're telling us what they have to do before they do it. They've had different movies on viruses and pandemics, and that was not a Freudian script. I made it on purpose. Plandemic, PLAN. They plan these things to reduce the population. They want to do away with 90% of the world's population. They think we're too crowded. So if people lasted longer, one of the things with the med beds, it will extend your life. It'll bring your health back to optimum procedure, operating procedure, optimal. So you're in your best health, you can live longer.
Great. You did a great job.
So let's buy the currencies that are next. What are they? Well, there's one in Mongolia. There's one that might be the Afghani, and there's one going to come up to the second basket in Central Africa. Right now, they're financed by the French, but they want to. So how we get those currencies, I'm not sure yet. I don't know yet.
How
But
about Zimbabwe?
Zimbabwe,
I've heard of that one.
but that's the first basket.
Okay.
So
First
you're not,
basket.
so we won't be able to buy that. You can buy it now. I have a friend of mine who just bought some the other day. But they're not cheap anymore.
Okay,
Um,
great.
okay. Well, you can call me conspiracy theorist or a nut or whatever, but I've learned to trust my gut, because all through scripture, we have so many conspiracies going on there. Later we find out are true. Even our own denomination, the YAHAD, works off conspiracy that Torah is very valid today. And I agree with that wholeheartedly, but some people would argue against that.
A lot of people. Yeah,
Okay.
probably 500 million or more Christians.
Yeah.
Thank you, Commander Lee.
Well, did my best.
I'll say a few words and then we'll be done. Just to put on the end.
Uh-huh. Did I do okay?
Yeah,
Parts here and
you
there.
did great. Really great. Okay, this is Jackson again, and Commander Lee did a good job, considering especially his failure of his health these last few years. But we can say one thing for sure, Commander Lee is back. This is Jackson Snyder Presents, February 9th, 2023, 24. Okay, we're done. 23.
So now I've got to be true to my word and find out how we can buy those currencies.